a study made, and it showed that those with high levels of pesticides in their urine were twice as likely to have ADHD. And there is the nice link that shows you there are some fruit and vegetables that are not as susceptible to sprays, not the systemic ones. Systemic ones are bad for everything, but the spraying poisons. There is a list that shows you which plants are less susceptible, so you can probably eat non-organic ones if you want. But it's called Dirty Dozen. There is 12 plants that are very, very susceptible to sprays, and you should never eat them non-organic. So next one, I like this one. So whatever happened to that Roundup noise? So after the Roundup case was won, there was a huge amount of cases that were about to hit the courthouse, but they settled. The Roundup, the company that owned the Roundup, sold it to a huge, giant German corporation called Bayer AG. And in America, I think it's called Bayer. So, and they shut everybody down. So they basically gave a little bit of money to everyone who wanted to sue. And so now Roundup is back in business. And I was very saddened because my agricultural extension, which I was a master gardener to, they sent a letter after this settlement saying that now we again support the use of Roundup, and we advise it to be used in home landscapes. So I really was not only saddened, but also maddened, because everybody understands that that was only done because someone paid money to someone, and that's not a good thing. So now let's get to we are done with bad parts, so let's get to the good part. So in our gardens, why are we usually afraid to start gardening organically? Because most of the time we are afraid that we will lose our plants, and we don't know how to prevent that loss. And so if we see an infestation, if we see some plant declining, right away we go and we buy the products that guarantee that it will become green again, like all the insects will be killed, all the fungus will be done with. So we go and buy whatever product is available and we are happy. But if we know the organic ways that are no worse than the chemical, the synthetic way, then I think we're in a better place. So the advice that is there is to stop, observe, ask, and make an educated decision. So most of the times, an infestation or a deficiency or something like that is not a sign of just like a sudden event. Most of the time it happens because something is not right down there in the ground. So later on I will explain that a little bit more. And when we start gardening organically, we have a completely different understanding of pests. So a pest is sometimes our friend because they tell us what's wrong with our plants. If a plant is weakened, if a plant needs something, sometimes it's just as simple as underwatering. Sometimes you just give it a little bit of water, a little bit of compost, and the plant infestations completely stop. Sometimes it's a little deeper problem, then you can just get more into it, because some deficiencies are a little fancy, you know, like some micro elements. But basically, whenever there is a big infestation in the garden, it tells you something. So resist the temptation to do something fast and allow yourself not to do. And in the big picture of your garden, just look at it, look at the infestation, whether it's like a pinpoint event or whether your garden is not healthy, whether something is going on there. Another interesting aspect that if you are growing something monoculturally, for example, if you have a big lawn, it's one plant occupying a big space and there are no other plants, and most people like to keep it very neat without weeds. So that's called monoculture. It's one plant monoculture. And usually when you have one plant growing, that one plant attracts pests and attracts disease. And if you have only one plant growing, then if a pest comes, chances are that pest will eliminate the whole lawn because it's just one plant. So there is no diversity. There is no, like, pests are also, they have the buffet preference. They would go to one plant but not to the other. So if your culture is polyculture, you have many different plants growing in a small space, then chances are that they will maybe eat one plant and leave everything else alone. And maybe then ladybug will come and help you and eat all the pests. And they will not propagate at such crazy numbers. So monocultures and infestations, like, for example, there was a huge problem with Chiquita bananas. They grow, especially here in Costa Rica and everywhere else in the world where bananas grow, they grow huge plantations, miles and miles of plantations of banana. So one pest comes, one pest eliminates all the bananas because they're all clones of one and the same plant. And that's not healthy. Monoculture is never healthy. So never grow a lot of one plant, grow big diversity of different plants. So for us, for my husband and I, the most important thing in the garden was to not sweat too much. So after you establish a garden, you don't have much to do, just maybe weed a little bit and leave it alone. So right now, our garden, nobody's taking care of it. And it's actually not dying. We don't water it. We don't do anything. We just come once every several months and we trim the branches that overgrew and we remove some weeds. But other than that, it's taking care of itself. And that's the main point of organic garden, to take care of itself so that you can relax and you can do other things, other beautiful, important things, so that you don't sweat all the time, making sure nothing is dying, nothing is getting eaten by caterpillars, etc. So organic garden, of course, requires in the beginning some initial investment and some elbow grease, but in the end it will pay you off tens of thousands of times. And here I'm saying that it's lazy gardening, it's easy gardening. So if you know how to establish it, then in the long run it will pay off. So make a smart initial investment and then collect dividends for years. You don't have to do what you don't have to do. How not doing actually helps your garden. And not doing, actually, there is this concept that's called no-till gardening. It's when you don't have to turn the soil, when you don't have to do anything, you just plant your plants. Because as I will explain later, soil forms connections inside that we don't see, but that are very, very important. And when you plant a new plant, it will just plug itself into the grid and it will connect itself to the grid, like we are all connected to the internet. So your plant will get connected to this grid of underground life. And underground life is much more diverse than the over the soil life. So if you connect your plant to that rich, not disturbed, wonderful network, then it will thrive. The plant will thrive because the system will help the plant to do its thing. So basically, that's the concept. So how to start your organic garden? As I already mentioned, it's all about soil and what is not seen. Build your soil first, and you will solve many problems that conventional gardens have. More on this later. When we just started, as I said, we just had a coral bed. So we had to import trucks and trucks and trucks of soil. We imported soil that was pretty neutral, that didn't have any life in it. It was muck. It was heavy. It was black. And we were actually lucky because most of the Florida gardens are sand, but our soil was, we made it eventually. We made it very rich. And we usually native soils always have the life of its own. Even sandy soils have life of its own. Our soil had nothing, so we had to start from scratch. To a degree, it was actually very educational because we started to research what soil needs, what organisms are needed for that. We built several different compost systems in our garden, not very complicated. I will explain that later too, but the whole garden was started from scratch. There were big trees already that grew through coral, and we didn't cut those, we just cut invasive species. But that's it. Everything else we brought in. And that's, as for soil, I will explain in detail later. So how to start your garden, you have to plan meticulously. And one of the good rules of a Master Gardener program is to plant the right plant in the right place. I don't know if you heard this phrase, but it's a very, very important phrase because every single plant has its own conditions. It's like, you know, when you marry a woman, she says, I want this and that. And if you don't give it to her, she divorces you. And same with plants, you know, if you don't give them nutrients, if you don't give them what they need, the amount of light, the amount of water, they will just divorce you. They will die or they will wither. So you have to first research every plant, what it needs and where it should be grown and which conditions it needs. So for that, it's very important to read the internet. Each plant that grows in South Florida has an EDIS file. I think I will have it 2 slides down. EDIS is the University of Florida system that has a plant file pretty much on every single plant that grows in South Florida, except like super rare ones. So you go online, you type EDIS, and then whatever else you need, like plant, like sweet potato. And it gives you a very detailed instruction on how to plant your plants. And if you follow this, if you follow the demands of the plant and not just your aesthetic value, then the plant will say thank you and it will be thriving for years. So if you really need to plant some plant somewhere where it doesn't belong, then think about the support system. And the support system is other plants surrounding it, like nitrogen fixing plants, or I don't know, pest control plants, or trees and bushes that will shadow it if it's not a sun-loving plant, like that. And so our garden, our South Florida garden, is completely irrigation free. We don't irrigate anything. Victor can vouch for that. We don't irrigate. And even our raised beds right now, I mean, when we just plant small baby plants, we water them, of course. So you have to plan your watering for just baby plants. Once they get established, they should be able to take care of themselves. Even our raised beds take care of themselves because they have such a diverse, rich life there underground. And that diversity actually makes them more drought resistant. So here we come to this very important thing. Grow your soil first. If you are starting a new garden, start with the right soil. If you have sand, you can still make the soil if you put a little bit of effort into it. So what is stable organic matter? Humus, biochar, and living roots. Living roots, we all know what it is. It's plants. Plants stabilize soil and don't allow it to deteriorate. Humus is the product of compost, the final product of compost. When compost deteriorates, when it all gets eaten by worms and microorganisms, it gets this very, very dark liquid, and that liquid is called humus. Biochar is the activated charcoal, and you can actually make it yourself if you are up for it, if your coding like city codes allow, but they also sell it. And what's so special about biochar, they have per millimeter of surface, they have some crazy amounts of pores where microorganisms live. So it's basically like a hotel for microorganisms. It's very important for the soils. So populate your soil and bring in the good guys. So who are the good guys? Mycorrhizae and trichoderma, beneficial nematodes, microbes of all kinds, the more the merrier, and worms and millipedes. And all of those things, I will explain a little bit about each of them later, but you can Google it and just put what is mycorrhizae, what is trichoderma, what is beneficial nematodes. And it's all online, it's all very widely available. And obviously we need how to promote worm and millipede activity. So basically, millipedes love mulch, and if you put mulch on your soil, it will be crazy amounts of millipedes right away. When we mulch, we just cannot count how many millipedes come. They just multiply at crazy proportions. And millipedes produce something that's called millipoo. And millipoo is no worse than worm poo, worm castings. So it's also a very good microbial product. So beneficial insects, I have a slide somewhere down also, very nice, beautiful slide, how to attract them. So basically we plant host plants and we plant nectar plants. And if we are talking about assassin bugs and ladybugs, ladybugs come when you have diversity. They come and just go for your pests, go for your mostly aphids. And I had this case of, let's quote unquote, infestation, where I planted a bean. It actually was a cowpea. And that cowpea was all covered in aphids. And I did nothing. I was just watching. I was just thinking, what to do? And then one day, a cloud of ladybugs came, and they had an orgy, and they had a party, and they had good time, and they took off in maybe 2 or 3 days, and there was not a single aphid left. So that's how organic gardens work. So you do nothing, you allow a little bit time. If it doesn't work, if nobody comes, then maybe you can apply some, I don't know, neem oil. Neem oil is also an organic product, but it's very, very strong, so you have to dilute it. There is a website called arbicoorganics.com, and you go to that website and you can choose by pest or you can choose by predator, and you will see who eats who. They have very detailed explanation. I have later on, I have one slide that shows a diet of some mite, some predatory mite. It's crazy. They give lots of information, so it's a good place to shop around. So as for your garden, never try to overturn the entire garden overnight. Even if you have like a team of landscaping architects like Victor's, start small because it will overwhelm you. If you don't know anything about it, then maintenance will be a nightmare. You will not understand anything. So start small, start from a little piece or a little plant, and maybe like a bag of worms or a bag of beneficial nematodes. Beneficial nematodes eat your root knot nematodes. So it's a good thing to just buy them and dilute them in water and just water your place where the nematodes are most crazy. So that's one thing. Then next one, group your plants according to their needs, not your needs. I already told you about this, and here it comes, IFAS and EDIS. These two abbreviations are from the South Florida Extension Office, the Miami University Extension Office. And in Google search, if you put this in front of your search, it will give you a plant file or plant fact sheet, as they called. I think I made one of those plant fact sheets for the extension office because I was volunteering there for a while before I moved to Costa Rica. So these are very, very detailed files and have lots of useful information. So always refer to them before planting your plant. Also, ask questions. There are groups of plant lovers who will give you advice. And if you go to organic groups, not just South Florida gardening, but like South Florida organic gardening or something like that. There are lots of groups. If you're on Facebook, there are lots of groups that if you ask a question, if you cannot find anything on EDIS or IFAS, then ask a question that people are so willing to share. People have lots of knowledge. People have lots of experience. They will always help. Okay, so what if you have a rare plant that you cannot find the plant file on? For example, there is this plant called naranjilla. So naranjilla is in the nightshade family, and it's very similar growth to brugmansia. So if you don't have a plant file on some plant, then just find which family it belongs to and find the closest relative, and their growth conditions will most probably like 90% will be the same. So you can refer to the brother, to the cousin of that guy, and you will get information. So now we got to compost. No, not yet, sorry. There are 5 lazy steps to an abundant garden, as other people do also observation. I talked about it. Chop and drop. What is chop and drop? Chop and drop is basically using your own plant leftovers as fertilizer. So what you do, not for every plant it works. For example, mangoes, they hate to be chop and drop. They don't want any organic matter. If after maturity, they don't want any organic matter. There are other plants that don't like chop and drop. For example, succulents, cacti, other things that don't like much nitrogen, like mangoes. So, but most of the plants, like majority of the plants, they love when you chop and drop. Chop and drop is basically a simple and lazy way to mulch. Not all the time you have mulch, not all the time you have time. So in South Florida, everything decomposes within half a year. That's my experience. When we mulch, in half a year, we don't have any more mulch left. So it's been a perennial chore that we stopped doing, and I will explain later why. So chop and drop is basically you cut plants, you trim plants, or you have special plants. For example, the Mexican sunflower is a perfect plant. They usually, in all organic references, they give you the Mexican sunflower as an example of chop and drop. So you chop it and you drop it. As you see here, it's just organic matter. It protects your plants. It gives microbial life and fungal life. So you don't have to do anything. It might look a little ugly, so you can shred it if you have a garden shredder. And then it will be a little more attractive. It will be like mulch. But basically, you just leave it there. You don't get afraid that it will get any kind of infestation or anything. Most that you will see there is grubs, but grubs are everywhere anyways. Grubs and millipedes, what I see. Our garden is located across from the Grainels Park, so we have lots of wildlife. And the grub problem is solved by raccoons and opossums. They come and they dig for grubs and they eat most of the grubs. So it's a very good thing that we have those animals. They don't go for garbage, they just go for their protein snack. So mulching. Mulching, of course, everyone knows that mulching is good for retaining moisture, for giving some carbon to the soil, and you water less, you spend less money, and also you don't use fake mulches. Those black and brown colored mulches in Home Depot, no, never buy those. They're so toxic. Please do not use them for your plants. Do not use them for the environment. They're bad. For the plants, they're bad. Use only naturally colored mulch. If you want to make it more attractive, there is this interesting spray that is sold in I think on Amazon that makes it green, and it's biodegradable. So if you feel like making it a little like festive or prepare yourself for Christmas, then you can spray your mulch with green. So right plant in the right place we already discussed. Biodiversity we already discussed that you should not plant monoculture. But we will get a little fancier than these 5 steps. As I already said, allow others work for you, plant perennials, replace annuals that have a similar taste or annuals that have similar flowers. Plant self-seeders. Victor did that and he really enjoyed it. So he basically put a corner where plants can self-seed, and you don't have to reseed them. You don't have to put any trays. Those plants have very strong seeds and they regrow every year. So you forget about them. You just let them do their thing. And some plants are actually very amazing and they do the work for you. For example, ageratums have been proven to eliminate to some degree root knot nematodes, and patchouli work against termites. They prevent termite infestation. So if you plant patchouli around your house, the smell is so bad. It's like patchouli smells like mothballs, and if I'm not mistaken, the mothballs are made out of patchouli. So you plant them around your house and termites will get disgusted and then will not come to your house. Giant milkweed. Giant milkweed, what's different, it's not a native plant, but I love it so much. We have a huge giant milkweed in front of our house, in front of our front door. And once an Indian lady came to us and said that it's actually a good thing to plant, like a good, what is it called? good fortune to plant a giant milkweed in front of your front door. Some Indian god loves it, and it gets happy when you plant it there. And giant milkweed, what's good about it? It grows very fast, and instead of, like native milkweeds, in my experience, they have always been very difficult to grow in South Florida. I don't know why. They're native, they're supposed to be strong, but no. So I planted many giant milkweeds around the garden, and we have millions of monarchs, and caterpillars are always there, and the chrysalises are over there, always there, hanging from the leaves, from the branches. So you don't have to, there are groups, butterfly groups, where they collect the caterpillars and they put them in boxes and they feed them the leaves, and it's so much work. I don't do anything. I just plant a giant one, and it feeds and it grows millions of butterflies. Tree basil. Tree basil, I actually don't remember what is so special about it. Maybe tree basil is like, instead of growing like 20 plants, you grow one tree basil, and it gives you as much volume of basil leaves. So insects to eat other insects, that we already discussed. Fungus to eat fungi. I will talk about it later. It's a trichoderma that eats other fungus. Predatory nematodes to eat harmful nematodes. Fungi to protect plant roots from root knot nematodes and help them withstand drought with less stress. That I am also talking a little bit, actually, in the next slide. So it's all about mushrooms. So you can see a tiny little plant here, and this is the root. The yellow is the root. See the yellow small root. And this huge network, it's actually a mycorrhizal mushroom. It's a fungus that attaches to the roots. These nodes is not nematodes. These nodes are beneficial to the plant, and they are mycorrhizae. So there are two types of mycorrhizae in general. There are many species of mycorrhizae, but two types. One is endomycorrhizae, and they work like a shield. They penetrate the roots, and they kind of merge with the root, and it builds this protective gear. And through that protective gear, invaders, fungus, diseases cannot penetrate. So it's like they basically shield the plant from invaders. The other one is ectomycorrhizae. They work on connecting the plant to the grid. As I told you before, the grid is this huge underworld life of mushrooms, microbes, and other microorganisms that we don't see. So it's the entire ecosystem. And what these mushrooms do, they dramatically increase plants' survival and the resistance to both drought and flood. And there have been research done by an Australian scientist also for many years, that proved that the drought resistance is increased dramatically. And for Florida gardens in the wintertime, it's a very important thing. And for flood as well. If your garden gets flooded, plants with mycorrhizal connections will survive much more, with a much more percentage than the plants without mycorrhizal connections. So they nourish crops with water and nutrients, naturally eliminate plant deficiencies. So what happens is that some elements, like most metals, they are not available in biodigestible form for plants. So mushrooms have this capacity to digest them and to deliver them to the plant in exchange for the product of synthesis of the light. So they have a symbiotic, not a parasitic relationship. So they both benefit from this relationship. It's a very interesting connection, and it's very beneficial to the plants. And they also build soil structure, as I told about aggregates before. They create soil aggregates. and they protect the plant from drought and other stresses. So mycorrhizae, they naturally live in native soils, but if you have depleted soil, or if you have soil that you have been spraying with antifungals, and if it's poor soil, then probably you have to buy. They are sold on Amazon, anywhere. You can now find mycorrhizae anywhere. And when you plant a new plant, it's recommended to just take the plant and just dip it in a bucket with mycorrhizae dissolved in it for several minutes, maybe like 15 minutes. And that already will create that shield on the roots. And when you plant it, the mycorrhizae will start growing and they will help the plant. Actually, the native mycorrhizae, they eat very fast. They eat the non-native mycorrhizae. But it's also a good thing. If you put non-native mycorrhizae, then it will stimulate the native mycorrhizae if they are in your soil. If not, then that's the only friend, the bot mycorrhizae. This is a big slide on how mycorrhizae work. You can read it when you get the presentation. I will not read through it right now because it's a lot of letters and not really important. Basic principle I already explained to you, but feel free to read it and later on and familiarize yourself with the science of it. Now, what is trichoderma? Trichoderma is a fungus that eats fungus, and it lives pretty much in any soil. But in the soils that have been sprayed with antifungals, it gets killed. So if you also buy it from Amazon, it will also very much help your plants. What we experimented with, mango flowers always have this like drop. Yearly, it has some amount of flowers gets dropped from the fungus. So what we did is when the blooms just started to open, we sprayed them with trichoderma, and the flower drop significantly got decreased. So it's really amazing. And it lives in the soils, in healthy soils, and it travels up the plants, the plant branches and leaves, and it helps to fight many diseases. So if you grow mushrooms commercially or for fun, keep trichoderma away because it will destroy your mycelium. So trichoderma is mainly used to control fungus and soil-borne diseases, as well as some leaf and panicle diseases of various plants, like I said about mango. Trichoderma can not only prevent diseases, but also promotes plant growth, improves nutrient utilization efficiency, enhances plant resistance, and improves agrochemical pollution environment. So it's another friend for you. Next one is BT. It's called Bacillus thuringiensis. It's also a microorganism. It's a bacteria, bacterium, bacillus, and it controls pretty much any caterpillar. But keep it away from you. Excuse me?
We have a question?
Oh, hi. Hi. I just had a quick question about the previous topic. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
What have you ever heard of this Ganoderma issue? Have you ever had that? And
yeah, Ganoderma is a fungus. It's a bad fungus and it kills palm trees. It's not a beneficial fungus.
Right. And so I have a friend who has it really bad.
Uh-huh.
And she doesn't do any chemical or anything. And she's gotten this really bad. What can be done about it? She's not really into chop and drop, but she doesn't really clean the yard very thoroughly. And she got Ganoderma really bad. And it's affected.
Ganoderma, the only solution that the Master Gardener program offered us was to burn it.
Is what?
To burn it.
To burn it, yeah. So
it's really bad, and it spreads its spores everywhere, and it infests other palm trees. So if you have one infested palm tree, chances are it will infest and kill other palm trees. So get rid of it as soon as possible and burn it. You cannot throw it in the garbage because the spores, they spread everywhere.
Right. So there, you don't have any of these other funguses like trichoderma or whatever that will help with that.
No, that is a mushroom. That's
Right.
um,
There's nothing, you don't have any solution.
I mean, you can research into it if trichoderma kills ganoderma, but I very much doubt that.
Is it the whole tree you have to burn? Or
Yes.
just the leaves?
No,
It kills the whole palm tree.
yeah,
It,
yeah.
it kills monocots for some reason.
Right, but it also gets on oaks too. It can get in oaks.
Yeah, but not in the degree, like it cannot kill an oak. It can probably be just maybe like over the years it will kill it, but the palm trees it kills instantly. All-
30 years, yeah, our oak is 100 years old and it's dying. Oh, well, okay, thank you, thank you.
No problem. So BT, here is the product that's most popular containing BT. It's called Thuricide, and it's approved for organic agriculture. And it contains this bacillus that kills pretty much any caterpillar. And it's without chemicals. It's totally biological control. And BT can be applied on variety of crops, trees, shrubs, and gardens, and vegetable gardens. It will not, even if you apply it, for example, yesterday, today you can already harvest your vegetables. It's not really damaging for your health. It's a key ingredient in products like this Thuricide and mosquito dunks, actually. It's a different strain of BT that used for mosquito dunks, but it kills the mosquito larvae. Okay, here is our list of most popular good bugs. So beneficial nematode, I told you about that. They eat the parasitic nematodes. Bees, we all know. Spine soldier bug, ground beetle, they all eat like little pests. The flies and the wasps that lay eggs into the caterpillars. And I don't really like that because slow death for me sounds very painful. I would rather just use BT and they get killed overnight, because this sounds so horrible when some eggs mature inside of your body and completely destroy your body. I don't like that. So I don't like those wasps that lay eggs in caterpillars, and especially because I raise monarchs and the zebras and the other butterflies. If I see that in a caterpillar, I really cry. I don't like that. Then green lacewing, very amazing, together with praying mantis. These two I really like. And ladybug, they have the same buffet, the same diet. So earthworm, you already know. So basically, if you have a pest, research it most likely has a predator, except for some like really exotic ones that come from, I don't know, from Asia. Like we had the avocado diseases, the lychee diseases recently in South Florida that nobody has found the solution to. Those come from Asia and they require killing of the tree. I don't know. I think in my experience, in my opinion, that if a tree is very strong and if it has very good connection to the grid, it has very less chance to get affected by even those weird exotic pests and diseases. I planted actually because all know that about the citrus greening, right? So we were buying all the fancy grafted citrus for our garden, and they all got citrus greening. But I planted several seedlings of a lemon from a commercial seed, and one tree got so strong and so big, and they did some research and they found out that if you plant citrus within the radius of the oak, that citrus did not have citrus greening. So I planted my citrus next to the oak, and it's amazing. It fruits, I don't know, like maybe 100 lemons at a time. And it's still young. It's maybe second year of production. So that grid that I talked about, the underground grid of microbes and fungus, it helps, and especially some chemicals that oak exudes, it helps with citrus greening somehow. So I think that with other diseases, it's also the same principle. Some support is given by the grid. So what to do with beneficial insects? We can introduce them, we can buy them in bags from nursery, we can attract them, we can plant bee and pollinator and other attractant plants. We can plant host plants, and also if you Google host plant for this and that, you will have a whole list of South Florida plants, also from EDIS or IFAS. And whatever works for you, just start doing it, and maybe get some eggs or caterpillars from your friends. And I also did that in the past. So it's very nice to network. And since you're part of the club, I'm sure you have a network that you can share with. Check out predatory mites. Predatory mites are actually very amazing insects. They are almost invisible, but they do the job. I had an whitefly infestation from my neighbor's Ixora, and my shade house was right next to it, and all my small baby plants were inside the shade house, and they started to get whitefly. And I bought a tube of predatory mites, special mite for South Florida climate. They specify on the website, they specify the name of that specific mite that goes. I cannot remember right now, but Victor can share with you later. And in probably a week, they were all gone. So they work really quickly. And here is the list that I will also not go deep into it, but this is the list from that website that sells them. So that's the beneficial nematode buffet menu. So you can see that they are very hungry worms, and they eat lots of things. So you can choose. They have different species: SF, SC, and HB. There are 3 different species of beneficial nematodes, and they eat lots of pests. Okay, so now about permaculture and biodynamics. So what we've been discussing earlier about organic gardening is very close to permaculture. Permaculture is all about being responsible and planting things in layers. And that also is good because we all know that if you plant a big tree first, it will give shade and protection to the smaller plant underneath, and give shade and protection to even smaller ones. And then you have ground covers, and then you have vines. So principles of permaculture can be applied in every little, small, tiny little backyard. And it's all good. It's all the same principles as principles that we discussed earlier. So permaculture, it's been a fancy word around, but there is really nothing fancy about it. There are circles of permacultural planting, like plant first close to the house, plant things that are most used on a daily basis, then plant things that are used a little rarer, then plant things in the third circle, plant things that you harvest seasonally and so on and so forth. So what is biodynamics? Biodynamics is a little more sophisticated. There was one guy who had a spiritual revelation, and he saw the entire system, that it was all a living organism. And he started to propagate microbes and bacteria in specific forms and shapes. Like he puts a cow horn on the ground at the lunar eclipse or equinox, something like that. So it's a very spiritual thing, and many people laugh at it. But in California, they started to do biodynamic farms for wineries, and they swear that the taste of the wines is much different, much better than the taste of regular wines. So it actually works. So if you are into biodynamics, just Google biodynamics Steiner, and it will all come. It's also very widely available. We practice biodynamics. We got some friend in north of Florida, and he shared with us the original preparations. And he said that there is even a microbe there that processes gold in the soil. I don't know how significant it is, but it sounded very interesting to me. Some microbe there in the preparations that, and it grows the biodiversity of your microorganisms, which is also very important. Compost does that to a degree, but they're also limited. In the biodynamic, it somehow grows exponentially. So biodynamics, I vouch for it, I do it, and here on the farm we are going to continue doing it on a much larger scale. So research it, it's very interesting. So the principles of permaculture that we can utilize for any size garden: accountability. We don't use things that harm the environment just to get quick results, and it's connected to the universal ethics. Permacultural systems have the diversity, stability, and resilience of natural ecosystems. So we basically replicate the forest, how everything is layered in the forest, how we have first the highest, then the lower, and it goes down to the ground cover. And we replicate that. It is the harmonious integration of the landscape with people providing the food, energy, shelter, and other material and non-material needs in a sustainable way. Helps to prevent disease, increase crop productivity, and get lazy. And multiple functions of plants and systems helps to save space. Perennialization of plants helps to save time, not to replant them every year. It definitely helps to conserve water because higher plants shadow the lower plants and give them leeway in in watering schedule, and also helps us to protect the aquifer, and feeding lots of creatures in the ecosystem without an outside input. So it's a closed loop system, basically. If you can get to it, then it's very good. I mean, not in the small garden, but our garden became zero waste. So we don't produce anything that we take out of the garden in the, our yearly garbage pickup. Nothing out of the garden goes there in our garden. So we utilize everything. So here you see that scheme of large, smaller, and the very small. And that way you also create microclimates. I'm sure you heard the word microclimate. And when you create microclimate, sometimes impossible things are possible. You create places for plants that are not supposed to grow in South Florida. You push your zones, so to speak. So Victor can vouch for that. He gave me some plants that were supposed to be annuals, And they were growing for like maybe 2 or 3 years, and he was so surprised because they were in the correct microclimate. They received the conditions that they would get in their natural habitat. More of this. Polyculture, I talked about it before. Okay, so here, be a greedy gardener. I had an amazing Instagram video that Victor Tom sent me. And it was about this girl who said, do not remove your leaves, do not throw away your leaves. The leaves is perfect food for your microbes. Leaves, when they fall down, branches, when they fall down, they decompose in South Florida very, very quickly. So you don't have to throw them away. And it might look dirty some places, but if you collect them and make some form of compost system, which I will talk next, it will look very neat and clean and nice, and pests will not ever get into it. I mean, mice might, but if you have a cat, that's not a problem. Closed loop system, that's what I talked about. Yeah, and we in our Florida garden is 3/4 of an acre. So it's a very small garden considering, and we have maybe 7 different types of compost systems. There are 20 different kinds of compost systems, so it's not as complicated. You can do whichever, and whichever suits you. You can even do in the house. There is this culture called bokashi, and you can do it even in the bucket. And bokashi is so powerful that people claim that it decomposes bones, animal bones. I never tried it because I don't produce animal bones, but people who do it, they say it's possible. And I've been in a house with bokashi compost, and there is no smell outside. And obviously there are no insects because you keep it completely closed. You keep it under the lid. And other systems can be vermicompost, also doesn't smell at all. You put all your daily vegetable and fruit cuttings, and you put some cardboard there, and it doesn't smell at all. The worms do the job, and you get perfect black gold. It's called the worm castings are called black gold.
What exactly is bokashi?
Bokashi is this culture. It's this another type of microbe, and they sell it in the form of small flakes, like brown flakes. Like if you know what nutritional yeast is, do you know what nutritional yeast is?
Yeah, nutritional yeast, like
It looks flaky, kind of like that, but brown in color. So you basically you put it and mix it together with your leftovers, and it starts making compost. So it's just another type of bacteria. Okay, so your own fertility program, compost, insect castings, with teas, bokashi, FPJ. FPJ is another amazing thing that you don't have to spend money, even you don't have to go to Amazon. FPJ was invented by some Korean scientist who found out that the concentration of microbes on the plant leaves is the highest when the plants breathe. That means after sunset and before sunrise. So during that time, either at night or very late in the evening or very, very early before sunrise in the morning, you go and you collect some leaves. And there are some species, if you Google it, it's also on Google. If you you collect specific plants, you can basically do, I did it with many different species, not only the one he recommends, and it always worked. So you take your wheelbarrow if you have one, or you take a jar and you put those leaves there in the jar. And it's so easy, so simple. You get the exact instructions online, but it's free. And it grows so many bacteria and so many microorganisms on just those leaves, because they were already on non-sprayed. Obviously, it has to be non-sprayed, non-chemically processed leaves, clean, organic leaves. So it's called fermented plant juice. So basically, you generate your own juice, and then you dilute it a lot, like you would do with tea or with compost tea. You dilute it and you water your plants. And other fermentations. This is a fermentation. So you basically grow bacteria on plants. So you can get also bunnies or chickens. Bunny compost, for us, we adopted some bunnies that nobody wanted, and they lived with us for a while, and we had the best compost, best bunny poop. They eat all the weeds. You don't need to buy them any food. They eat all the weeds in the garden. They love Bidens alba, which we hate. So they were our best friends at deweeding the Biden albas. Biden alba is very widely advertised in all the native and all the organic groups, but we really don't like it because it spreads like wildfire. Chickens, they eat everything. My neighbor, next door neighbor, has chickens, and once she removed a cardboard, and there were like hundreds of cockroaches underneath. And chickens went there, and in like 15 seconds, they finished all the cockroaches. So they're very hungry birds. They help you get rid of pests, but they also dig. So don't get them into the vegetable garden. But you can put them in places where you have established plants. They will not harm them. Another thing, it's also a little controversial because people don't really like to talk about it. Bodily fluids, pee, and some people produce humanure. I'm not very much into humanure because I think it's a little dirty, and it contains E. coli, which can contaminate your food. But people use humanure too for their gardens, and I know one guy who swears by it. He has a very popular YouTube channel, but I would not personally recommend to do that unless, I don't know, you burn it or sanitize it somehow. I don't know, but pee is sterile. Urine is sterile, so you can easily use it on your plants. Not like the plants that you're about to eat, like not the raised beds, of course, but big plants like bananas, for example. Bananas need nitrogen, and pee is a great source of urea. So another thing is if someone is menstruating, menstrual blood is it's like, you buy blood meal in the store. It's much healthier to collect your own and to fertilize your plants with that. Some people feel icky about it, but there is nothing icky. It's part of your body, so there is nothing icky about your blood. Another big thing is harvesting rainwater. So we put copper, what are they called? Drains on our house, and we collect rainwater, and we have a pond in front of our house that's completely fed by rainwater. We don't put any chlorine, we don't put any chemicals at all, and the water is clear and clean. You will see it in some next slide. And rainwater and mosquito fish is a great, perfect combination. So here is another slide about composting. When you get the presentation, you can look through it and see it's like a big structure here. How to choose what type of compost to do. And here are some fancy and not so fancy compost bins. But as you see, this lid doesn't allow pests to go in. So like raccoons will not go inside, opossums will not go inside, they will not trash your compost. More systems, more composting. Even you can use just a plastic bin or just chicken wire to make a compost. And here is this crazy sophisticated system that's used. It's called Johnson Sioux compost. You can also research it if you want. And it's called a bioreactor, and it produces a really, really huge diversity of microbes. Another reminder to not throw away your plant trimmings. Chop and drop, green manure. For compost, they recommend the greens and browns ratio of 30:1. So compost usually consists of greens, which are food scraps, green leaves, fresh leaves, and anything fresh. And browns are wood chips, fallen leaves, cardboard, paper shreds, etc. Something dry and just carbon source. So what happens if you have too many browns and not enough greens? Then your compost will not work because there will not be enough life to it. Yes?
Yeah, I'm wondering about just your regular vegetable peelings from inside your house. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't normally put them down in the garbage disposal because some of them are too tough.
No, that's actually your money. Vegetable peels,
So I use a lot of
collect them in the system together with
Yeah.
take a box, shred it if you have a shredder, or cut it in like tear it in small pieces, and here is your composting system. Very simple and easy. Do not ever throw organic matter away. That's what feeds your organic garden.
Did you ever hear of someone named Larry Shockman?
Can you repeat?
Larry Shockman?
No, who is that?
He was the horticultural director at the Campon. So
Ah,
he believed, he was a big proponent of chop and drop. So at the Campon, the botanical garden, it's a home of David Fairchild,
yeah.
that mulch like 2 feet high.
Yeah, we started our garden inspired by the Kampong. I love that garden so much.
Yeah, the new director and the subsequent directors have changed the policy a little bit, but they still mulch a lot. But he was really into chop and drop and very high mulch. So like the mulches were sometimes 3-4 feet high. I mean, he would just pile.
Yeah, yeah. I remember once we came and there was a guy spreading mulch.
Yeah, well, he was really into the mulch. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, and in South Florida, as I already said earlier, in South Florida, our benefit against the north and the other parts of the world is that everything decomposes so fast.
Right.
You don't really need to make like fancy, sophisticated compost systems. If you are not afraid of pests, which we are not afraid because we have lots of stray cats in the garden, they just love to chill there in the shade of all the plants. We just put piles of organic matter and it decomposes by itself. We have a huge pile of biodynamic compost, which also decreases in size, like double the size in like 6 months.
Right.
So everything decomposes. Don't be afraid to keep organic matter in your garden.
Do you have any problems with air potato? And what do you do about it?
Problems with what?
Air potato? The vine?
Air potato. I mean, the only I remember they sent me an email, the extension office, that they had some trials with some bug.
Right.
Yeah,
They don't stay. They move.
But you know, we didn't really have a problem with it because when it appears, we just remove all the bulbils. We just remove them physically. And
Right. Right.
So
Right. What
yeah,
about,
if you don't want to be fancy, just physically remove them. If you do, then research into that bug, and I don't know, because there was some research done and then they stopped it. I don't know the reason. They never sent a follow-up email.
right, yeah. Well, I think they lost funding for that project, but I got some eventually, but they don't.
Maybe that bug started eating some other thing it was not supposed to eat.
It's not that bad. It's just, I think they lost the funding for it. But, the other thing I was gonna ask, have you ever heard of caviar lime? Have you ever grown that, Micronesian
Of
citrus?
which,
Caviar lime? Caviar
yeah,
lime?
it's an Australian citrus. Yeah. What about it?
Have you grown it?
We have not, but we have lots of friends from Tropical Fruit Forum that have it.
Yeah, okay. And what about breadfruit? Have you been able to grow breadfruit?
Oh, breadfruit is here in Costa Rica. It's actually it's growing like weed, so it's very easy to grow. But in South Florida, it's a little difficult because when that 2 or 3 days of cold come,
Right.
you have to take care of it. You have to cover it, and you have to put lights under the cover. So it's a little like time consuming. So we didn't grow it for that reason. It's ultra tropical, as I mentioned before.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so here is the reason why we stopped using mulch, because we switched to ground covers. We use mulch, our own mulch still, and as I said, we make piles of organic matter in places like under some plants. Like we have a huge noni tree that doesn't allow anything to grow under it, even the ground covers. So we pile organic matter under, and it gives it some nutrition. But places like lawn or like in between plants and between trees. These plants grow wonderfully and they provide nice view, and they don't have to be mowed, and they give food for butterflies. For example, this frog fruit, this one, it is food for native butterfly called white peacock. And this one is perennial peanut, and it's nitrogen fixing. And this Mimosa strigilosa, it stabilizes soil, and it's also nitrogen fixing, and it's native. So lots of different interesting ground covers that grow in South Florida that you can use instead of mulch or lawn, and they look attractive and they look very uniformal. So this perennial peanut, it grows beautiful yellow flowers, and there is another form of perennial peanut that has like more needly leaves and a little orangey flowers, a little more orange, not as bright yellow. And that one is extremely drought tolerant. So for places that you have complete lost hope for and grass doesn't grow, you can grow that variety. Another thing, if you still want to get mulch, you don't have to buy it in the Home Depot. You can order it from FPL, or you can just, when you go around the neighborhood, when you see people trimming trees and doing landscape and they have a shredder, wood chipper, you just talk to them and they will be very happy to drop it in your garden instead of going to the landfill, because they have to pay something around $400 for one drop. And as I told you before, the colored mulch is the scary thing. Do not ever use colored mulch. Even if it looks attractive, even if it looks neat, avoid at all costs. This is my my shredded wood. We had a huge tree growing that we needed to shred, an invasive tree, and we hired a guy who had the wood chipper, and he chipped it all into our driveway. We put couple tarps under, and so the driveway didn't suffer. And here is our what do you call it? It's not even a wheelbarrow. It's a soft thing that's very easy to fill in and very easy to unload because it has those latches here that you can just drop it and you don't have to take it out shovel by shovel. So it's also, we bought it at some Amazon, I think, store. So if you ever do tree trimming, make sure that your landscaper has their mulcher. Never dump organic matter to the landfill. So now about the roses. So Victor was gracious enough to gift me some of his precious roses, and we experimented with them, and the experiment came very beautiful, and they all bloomed and they all had beautiful flowers, and even organically, even that hungry plant like rose that needs a lot of feeding, that needs very special soil, that needs lots of care. In my organic garden, it was not different than the rest of the plants. So overall, the roses were not treated differently or better than the other plants, except a few things like acidic soil and additional feedings that I will explain in the next slide. So I had great experience with roses. So the challenge with roses, as you probably all know, is that they're very hungry. The more organic matter, more worms, more. They love acid, so you need to add organic acidifiers, and you need to group them in good soil. So what we did, we dug out maybe 2 feet, no, 1 foot, not so deep, maybe one and a half foot of soil, and we replaced it with acidic organic, very rich organic matter with compost, and basically like pure compost with peat, a little bit of peat. And so they performed beautifully, and they still, we haven't been at home for a year, and they still bloom, and they still are alive, and they have no diseases, and we have not even been beheading them, the dead flowers, and still they bloom, which is very surprising to me. So what fertilizers roses need? So every synthetic fertilizer has an analog in organic form. For example, we have this big list of things that contain different amounts of NPKs and different amounts of micro elements, everything that's needed for roses. And if your soil is not acidic enough, you can always add elemental sulfur or peat. Peat, not recommended by organic gardening because it's not sustainable, because it's harvested in a very bad way from Canadian swamp, and swamp is basically a filter. It's like the lungs or kidneys of our ecosystem. So we would not want to remove peat normally from the swamp. So elemental sulfur is sold in pellets. What we do, and that sulfur is mixed with clay, just regular clay. So what we do, I have a NutriBullet, and I bought a special blade, separate blade, and I use it to pulverize the pellets. So I use it as powder, and I spread it around, and when the rain comes, it all gets into the root system, and that is usually enough for the acidifying of the soil. But our soil in the rose garden is pretty much acidic by itself, from all the worm castings, from all the composts and compost teas and FPJs and whatever. I put a little bit more effort, like whenever I do feedings of my plants, the first dose, the first portion goes to roses always. That's it. I don't really do much, but that has not been a nuisance to me at all. The roses have not got any special treatment other than that. So what I learned about organic roses in South Florida, and I learned it from Victor, is that Fortuniana rootstock plants performed much better than roses that were not grafted in my garden. Having the amended soil in place before planting made a big difference. I did not have any major problems with fungal diseases like black spot, and no diseases at all, no pests at all, which surprised me because usually back in my childhood, roses always had some aphids and some other things. And the biggest chore for me was trimming the spent flowers off. That's it. And these are my roses in my garden. And I think one of those pictures is in Victor's book about roses. So now, if you are not yet tired, it's a little bit left, but specifics of growing edibles. So edibles always have to grow in like perennial, annual edibles always have to grow in raised beds because of the flooding and because they are susceptible to change in conditions. So what we use, this technique called Sho Sugiban, it's an Asian Japanese technique of preserving wood, which helped us tremendously. It saved wood. Like maybe we even made a video and it became viral on our channel, how to make, and 1 year update, because nobody else did it before. The raised beds using Soshugiban technique. It's basically a technique of burning the wood. We bought a $50 torch from Home Depot, and I connected it to propane tank and burned the wood. And then we covered it with tung oil. Tung oil, what's special about this oil is that it dries, like usually oils don't dry, right? This oil dries completely solid. So it gives a very nice protection. And that helped us a lot because the raised beds that we had before that were not protected rotted and got eaten by termites in no time. So these raised beds serve us until now, and they're doing a great job. They're not deteriorated. See the grain you can see very well here. So the wood ash got watered away by Florida rains, but the preservation still persists. As for the things that you can grow in your raised beds, there is a lot of information online. I just want to show that in our case, we grow both annuals and perennials in the same bed. For example, this is African potato mint. It's not really, it's in the mint family, but it's not really eaten as mint. It has little tubers that are edible. So in winter time, it dies off, the greens die off, and the little tubers, they overwinter under the soil. And we plant the regular like northern vegetables on top of it, and they're both happy, they don't suffer, so it has a double purpose. As for mulch in raised beds, you also can mulch them for sure, but the mulch is supposed to be different because the vegetables, they need more bacterial compost, bacterial soil than fungal. So for trees, those mycorrhizal networks are very important because they connect them to the grid. For vegetables, mycorrhizae actually can sometimes not damage, but hinder the growth because they take over the soil, and the plants don't like, the vegetables don't like that much. So you create with compost, and with compost teas, you create the microbial environment. So compost makes microbial and mycorrhizae makes fungal. So that's the main difference. And the mulch, you use thinner mulch. Like here, as you can see, we used the wood shavings that were the beds for the bunnies. So it's wood shavings with bunny poop. Or you can use hay. Hay is also very good mulch for raised beds. this is my pond, and you can see how clear the water is. The leaves are a little bit beaten because this picture was taken when the water lily was not supposed to bloom, wintertime. Water lilies usually bloom in summertime, but our water lilies, because the water is so amazing from all the rainwater, it blooms all the year round. And this is sweet potato. It took over completely the Buddha statue, and the water is clear, and we have mosquito fish, so we have absolutely no mosquitoes. I was in Florida maybe 3 weeks ago, and I was working all day in the garden, and I was not bitten even one time. No mosquitoes. So what's important for Florida, for growing in Florida? So help plants grow deep roots. Deep watering versus shallow watering. So better water once a week deeply than every day shallowly. Because when the roots grow deep, it allows them to stabilize the tree against winds and hurricanes and whatnot. So how to help them withstand and thrive. Also, plant trees that don't grow so fast. Plant slow-growing trees, because slow-growing trees, the wood is much stronger than the fast-growing trees, and they break much less. If you also starting from scratch and you can grade your soil, always grade it in such a way that the water doesn't flow like in a big flood. Make little berms, make little hills everywhere, and make sure the grading goes in a proper direction. And as I talked about mosquito fish already, it's here under the surface. There are lots. We have a huge population of mosquito fish living there. They're very happy, and they help control the mosquito population much better than the ducks. Here, that we already discussed most of it. Oh, this is a very important thing. So if you have cats, never buy them feather toys. Never buy feather toys. Buy them something like this. We bought when we had a cat, we bought our cat a rubber lizard, and he played with it, and then he started to bring us baby iguanas, which is a big pest in South Florida, as you know. So he never hunted for birds. People always cry about, oh, cats are an invasive species, cats kill birds, cats kill wildlife. Our cat, because he was trained a specific way, he never killed a bird. Neighbor's cat killed birds before, but we really harassed her for that, and she stopped. So she also started to eat mice. He sometimes brings us just the face of a mouse. Sometimes we see dead iguana somewhere in the garden. So that's the preferred food, because I have never tried, but people said that it tastes like chicken. So it's very tasty for a cat, and it's much more meat and much less work than a bird. So if you train your cat properly, it will hunt your iguanas and will eliminate half of your problem if you have iguana problem. And one invasive species controls another invasive species. Isn't that the best? Okay, so the last but not the least, allow your garden to be imperfect. As I said before, do not react. First observe, make an educated decision, and then act according to your knowledge, not according to your fear. Very important. And allow your garden to have natural cycles and seasons. Do not expect your garden to always be beautiful, even though you're in South Florida. Better plants that are not like plastic landscapes, like palm trees and, like monstera. Diversify it, make it interesting. Victor does those British cottage gardens that I cannot get enough of. They're so subtle, they're so beautiful. That is one way to go. There are lots of things that you can do to make your garden very diverse and beautiful at the same time, and not look like a, usually they say food forest, and you come and you end up in like a wild, uncared jungle. We don't like that. We like beautiful, like nice landscape that has emotional and aesthetic appeal. So we like to plant things that are beautiful. We don't like to make it just edible. And layers of plants, as I already told before, and interplant summer and winter plants that will avoid those holes in the landscape. And that's the perfectly imperfect principle. Yeah, and also one thing, that some plants need fruit to be removed. For example, we have a guava plant that constantly gets infested by fruit fly. So if you have this problem, then you have to remove the organic matter. You have to remove the infested fruit, because next it will propagate the next season of fruit flies. So what I do, I take those affected fruit, the ones that we bag, we put them into the mesh bags and they fruit beautifully. They don't get any flies. But the ones that we miss, I put them in the freezer. And after that, the larvae dies, and then I feed it to the compost after that. Okay, so enjoy your organic garden. That's it. That's the end of my presentation for today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good job.
It's okay.
Very, very good. Thank you, Vava.
You're welcome. Any questions?
Yeah, what's the mosquito fish?
Mosquito fish is this little native fish that's like this big. It's very thank you, Neil. It's very unhandsome, how to say, just very common looking, gray. And you can see them in pretty much any river in Florida. And what we did, because we live on the river, our garden is on the river. So we just asked our neighbor boy to collect them from the river. He brought it to our pond, and they started propagating like crazy. So now we have like a huge population in the pond. And they eat mosquito. They're like piranhas. They jump out of water to get, if something drops into the water. And once I put my feet, and they start to do the pedicure, like they show those Thai pedicures.
Are you talking about minnows? Is it minnows? You know what a minnow is?
Maybe it's a kind of minnow.
Yeah, it might be. She's describing a minnow, I think.
Do you live in Costa Rica? You live in Costa Rica, or
Now I live in Costa Rica, yes.
how is Costa Rica? Do you have poisonous snakes there, and how do you avoid them?
Snakes, we have not encountered any yet. I mean, when we were bulldozing the space for the house, my husband saw one, but it did not attack. I have not seen. I've been bitten by a Scorpio, but here the Scorpios are not poisonous, so it was less than a bee sting.
Yeah, because supposedly the snakes are very dangerous there to garden.
Yeah, there are some poisonous snakes, but luckily the Scorpios are not dangerous, because Scorpios crawl into your house because some days it gets a little cold, and they want to get warm, and they crawl inside your house. And once I stepped on one, and he just bit me in the foot.
What altitude are you at?
Sorry?
How are you on the mountain or something? Or
Yeah, we're 1,000 elevation,
So can you grow
1,000 meters.
Can you grow Maracuya granadilla or Passiflora icalaris? Can you grow that there? You know
You
that?
can grow any kind of passiflora, any kind. There are like millions of passifloras here, and granadillas as well.
Granadilla?
Yeah.
You grow that?
Yeah, triangularis we grow.
Icalaris. Icalaris? Yeah.
Triangularis. Triangular stem.
Yeah, that's a different one. Okay, yeah, thank you, thank you.
No problem.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Victor, great suggestion. Vava, we would love to have you back in the future if you put together a new presentation and you'd be so gracious as to share it with us again. We'd appreciate that. And when you come back to Florida, you come see us.
Thank you.
We'd love to have you in our gardens and have your sage advice here. Are there any questions? Any other questions?
I do have one question about coffee grounds. I've heard that it was good, but I recently read an article that said that, once you cook the coffee or use the coffee grounds, all the actual beneficial parts of it is gone and they don't recommend it anymore. I mean, what's your take on the coffee ground?
No, what is a coffee ground? It's basically carbon. So always add any organic matter to your soil. It will not acidify your soil, unlike many anecdotal evidence, but it will still be beneficial because it's added carbon. So add it to your compost bin.
Okay.
Worms don't like grounds in big amounts. A little bit you can put, but worms, if you have a worm bin, do not put grounds there.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Hey, any questions, Neil, at home? Nope. All right.
We're
Well,
good.
recording this, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.
Yeah, Victor will send the presentation a little later. I will forward it to him.
Okay.
He will send it to your list, to
You
your
got it.
garden list, and you can